Hello, and welcome to Noonday Meditation and Contemplative Prayer Power Hour. My name is Martin Coward, and we have been gathering in this virtual sanctuary for over a year now to provide love and support each other through the pandemic crisis. And we're now on at least another side of that. All of our lives are different today than they were a year ago. And so now we're trying to kind of reposition this conversation to now what do we do with this? Now that we've come through this crisis, how do we take what we've learned about ourselves and the world and what's true and what's not to make the world better, to create economic systems and social structures that benefit everyone so that we can all enjoy a life of love and joy and prosperity. And what we've been doing this month of April, we've been celebrating gay, bi, and transgender men, extraordinary GBTQ men doing ordinary things that inspire us. And today I'm so excited to welcome Gareth Higgins to our show as our guest today. Gareth is an author. He's just written a book that's fantastic. He's also a fellow Mankind Project Warrior brother of mine. I just recently met him. And he is on a mission to change the world to make it better through storytelling, to get out of living in a false narrative, just like me, get out of this false narrative that's so painful and start living into the truth. But you can't spiritually bypass the dark stuff. You got to go in and you got to lean into it. You got to get to know it, because the more we get to know those darker parts of ourselves, the more we get to love ourselves, and we get to move into a more whole, complete person. So I'm going to so Gareth has got his spin on that. He's written a book. He's a wonderful. I just met him and through a mutual friend of ours. I just am thrilled to death to know him, and I'm looking forward to a long relationship with him. And I'm looking forward today to hearing his story. So Gareth, thank you for joining. Oh, by the way, one more thing, if you're joining us, please, I don't know who you're here. I just see numbers on the screen. So if you would just put your name and say hello in the chat box so that I know you're here. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in. We love to create as much interaction as possible. So from that place, Gareth, thank you for joining us today, and please tell us a little bit about how you got here.
Well, thank you, Martin. Thank you for having me. Your question's a really interesting one. Tell us a little bit about how you got here. I'm going to answer that in an unconventional way. That I think will answer what you mean, although not what you said.
Okay.
So here's how I got here. I think you might have got here in a similar way. There was a time when I was completely secure, totally safe. I had no sense of questioning, no sense of skepticism, cynicism, or anxiety. I was absolutely warm, bathed, perfect temperature. I was in a cave. I was surrounded by liquid. It was like being, you ever been in one of those, what do you call them? Those isolation chambers that they have in high-end spas these days, where you get into the water and it's all dark. What are those? I can't remember what they're called.
They're called immersion tanks.
Yes, yeah, and they're supposed to deeply relax you. Well, there was a period in my life where that's all I knew. I had no before and no after. I was just in one of these absolutely glorious immersion tanks. The liquid that was surrounding me was so perfect that you could even breathe it. And every now and again, I would hear this lovely music coming at me from outside the wall of the cave. And I didn't know what music was. I just found these sounds pleasant. And then one day, all of a sudden, without any warning at all the water rushed out of the cave extremely quickly. And I was turned around and thrust down a tunnel. Now, I didn't even know what a tunnel was. And I don't know if this is how it happened to you, because for some people, they didn't go down a tunnel. For some people, the roof of the cave was cut open. And these Godzilla hands came in and grabbed them. But I got thrust down a tunnel. And the longer the tunnel got, the narrower it became. And I started to feel like I was suffocating. And up until this point, I didn't even know suffocation was possible. And just at the last moment when I thought I was going to die, I was launched out of the end of the tunnel into this bright light where there were these monsters, giants standing around me. One of them grabbed me by the legs. Another one took out this pair of scissors. It was the first pair of scissors I'd ever seen. And they cut the cord that connected me to the soft, gentle security of the cave. And then they placed me on top of this mountain that would gently rise and fall and rise and fall. And it'll come as no surprise to you that the very first sound that I made was wah! It was a pretty terrifying experience. That's how I got here. And the reason I say that in response to your question is because I think being born is probably a lot like dying. And the experience, if any of us had been conscious of it, and I know there are some people who believe they remember being in the womb. I don't have those kinds of memories, but if we were conscious of it and somebody told us, hey, you can choose to tomorrow be thrust down a tunnel and feel like you're suffocating and come out into this total insecurity and risk and not know what's going to happen next. Or you can stay inside this lovely warm cave filled with no self-consciousness at all, just joy and security. I think lots of us would probably choose to stay in the cave. And of course, ever since somebody introduced me to this idea of thinking about it this way, I've pondered it a lot. And yeah, there are times when I want to go back into the cave. There's no doubt about that. But I've come to the view that actually that's what sleeping is for. That a third of our lives, 8 hours a day, we are actually invited to go back into the cave and to experience the security of surrender to whatever might happen there. And some of us have sleep disorders. I have a sleep disorder and it's being treated. And there's some people with very terrible sleep disorders, and God bless those folk. And I don't want to be disrespectful or insensitive to anybody who has a hard time sleeping, but at its best, sleeping is like a return to the womb. And the waking hours are like being expelled from the womb. And no matter how difficult your life has been, I think in our highest selves, we wouldn't choose to go back into that predictable security and exchange it for the unpredictability of what we call life. That's the kind of mythic answer. The more mundane answer is, I'm from Ireland. I live in North Carolina. I'm back in Ireland on sabbatical, and I'm here because our mutual friend thought it might be good for us to have a conversation about fear and storytelling.
Yeah, I love the analogy. I completely agree. You know, what makes me think, I love the thing about this, about sleeping. I do think that's an opportunity for us to go back into the womb, because we do go into a world of being of dreams, and we may have nightmares, but there's not a sense of fear, and this, what it comes down to is that when we wake up in the morning, it is like, when I wake up, with what Ken Wilber calls the gross state. We're really in that physical body, and it's not comfortable. We're in the hard edges of ourselves.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so that's why I always tell people that the first thing we do in the first 7 minutes is to get back into that higher level of consciousness that has that same experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because I think we do all wake up as we're just born into the world. Like, oh my God, this is all kind of harsh and hard, and I'm not good enough, and I don't know how to navigate all this. And the truth is, by ourselves as a one single little body, we're not enough. Mm-hmm. We have to tap into that gigantic creative energy force that we are to breathe, and that's what we do. So I love that. That was beautiful.
Yeah. Well, it speaks to me about the fear of death, the death that's coming to us all, you know, that we're all aware of, and how if we can transform our fear of death, even just a little bit, you know, one of the things I want to be really careful about when I talk about transforming fear through the stories we tell, it can be another it could be another thing to beat ourselves up with, to say, oh my God, I'm still experiencing all this fear and I haven't changed enough yet. There's something else for me to feel guilty about.
Let's say hello to Randy, who just joined us here. Hello, Randy. As Bella, so glad you could join us today. Thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you on as our guest, and I mean as our guest, as our part of our audience today and tuning in. So thank you. And if you have any questions for me or for Gareth, please please put them in the chat. And thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, so if we can transform our fear of death even a little bit, I think it actually starts to unlock our fears of everything else. Because, you know, all the spiritual wisdom traditions that the world has ever known say versions of the same thing, right? And that is, don't worry about tomorrow, which I think is another way of saying, like, don't worry about your death, which is, you know, coming tomorrow, maybe literally tomorrow, maybe 50 years tomorrow. And do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, or don't do to other people what you wouldn't want them to do to you. All the spiritual wisdom traditions of the world agree on these things.
Exactly. Let's just say hello to this Facebook. I don't know your name, Facebook viewer, but glad you're here too. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, unless their name actually is Facebook user.
And that's your name is, but I guess live, you got to go in and there's a little link somewhere near the video, near this live action here, where you can actually go in and you can give StreamYard permission to show your name. But
it would make life very inconvenient if your name was Facebook user. You know, so
it'd be very confusing. Right?
It would be very confusing. So I think if we can transform the fears we have through the stories we tell, and start with the fear of death, it can unlock a whole lot of just like joy, gratitude, and blessing in life. I was reading yesterday that the literary critic Harold Bloom translated the word in Hebrew for blessing as more life, you know. And so when we say bless you, or we ask for a blessing, what we're asking for or giving is, or wishing for the other person, is more life. And it may not mean we get more life as in another 24 hours of breathing, but this moment that I'm in right now might expand. You know, I can hear an airplane out my window, and I'm looking at you, and I'm looking at my desk. There's three things just to begin with that I can claim gratitude for. I claim gratitude for travel, for pilgrimage, for all the times that I've been able to go places and connect. I claim gratitude that somebody that I didn't know 3 years ago introduced you and me, and that we're getting to have this conversation right now. I claim gratitude for the comfort of the chair that I'm sitting in.
I love that. Hello, Richard Dowling. Stop for a second. I just want to acknowledge Richard Dowling for joining us. And we'll get back to our conversation on gratitude. Richard, so glad you're here. Glad you could join us today. I want to just say something about gratitude, because you just made me think of stuff. When I've spent a lot of my time in somewhat elevated senses of gratitude and consciousness, and I'm really happy for that, because I've been years of practice. And often what you're doing is, like, I went for a walk this morning, I'll say, turn up the gratitude knob. Just look around and just turn up the knob. And see how much gratitude you can really experience in this moment. So I consciously actually see myself turning the crank up and say, oh my God, look how beautiful these bright green trees are today. I'm grateful to be alive. And all of a sudden I get this feeling similar to what you described of being in that room.
And you know, if you're in a place where gratitude seems impossible, or it just seems out of reach, bless you. You know, that's where you are.
That's where you are.
And I respect that. And like, I'm not going to coerce gratitude out of you, but I want to hold space and show you I'm here for you for whatever I can help you with right now. I think that we're dealing with, shall I say a little bit more about fear?
Absolutely. I'm going to let you run with this. You're doing great. This is perfect.
So I grew up in a society where there was a lot of fear, and it was because there was a lot of violence, and there was conflict, and a lot of people hated each other, and there was threat and actual violence a lot of the time, and people dear to me suffered. My family was directly affected by the violence. some terrible things happen. And on the inside, in addition to these external threats that felt like they were coming at us, on the inside, I had fears to do with the fact that I was growing up in a deeply homophobic society, deeply homophobic politically, culturally, and in terms of religion, and navigating what it is to be a child and a teenager who didn't know what my sexual orientation was. I knew that I wasn't that I didn't fit within the parameters that the society seemed to prescribe for me, and I was confused and had these questions. And the only answer that was that kind of came my way from the culture was, "There's something wrong with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's something wrong with you. Sin, psychological ill health, or even demons." You know, I was around some people who thought I was demon possessed. Now, I've come to the view that you don't have to have grown up in a society like the north of Ireland, or to have grown up confused about your sexuality, to identify with the notion of external threats and internal fears. Everybody has something like this. And I'm sure you want to welcome Randy to
Yeah,
the
I don't know.
call.
Hey, Randy, Pastor, don't you think the world puts so much fear of death? And if you're not, I think when you say the world, I would say we do this to ourselves. The world doesn't do it to us. We create these narratives of fear.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm going to say. And whether you're Christian or you're not Christian, I think every religion, when it gets into dogma, it controls by fear. And we create narratives based on fear to control people. That's what I think. Now, I don't know what Gareth thinks, but that's my take on your question.
Well, I think part of the question was also, how might you help move towards security of not being fearful of death if you're not spiritual or Christian? And I think I know plenty of Christian traditions that are very afraid of death, and that's why I think they've constructed a kind of a simple ticket to, we take away the fear of death by controlling people through conversionist narratives. Now, that's not all religion, it's not all Christianity. I tend to think that religion, politics, and the media are three terms that are neutral. There's healthy religion, healthy politics, healthy media, and there's unhealthy versions of all of them as well. And Absolutely. The way I assess it or evaluate it is it moving toward, does it expand more love in the world? Now, love is not something that just goes on a Hallmark greeting card. Love is extending yourself for the sake of others. That's what love is.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the kind of love I'm talking about. The love, and that doesn't mean martyrdom. It doesn't mean I never get anything in return. That's kind of, there can be an egocentric martyrdom thing where I think we all know people who just are always giving, but they would never receive. You can never give them anything in return. There's a flow here of interdependence where I bring my gifts and share from those resources to serve the common good, and where I am honest enough to look in the mirror and say, here's the place where I lack, where I have need. Can you help me with this? And I think for a lot of people, actually naming that we have a need is the most frightening thing we can do.
That is the most vulnerable, to say, I need help with this.
That's right. Especially if you're a certain kind of man. Actually, there's a kind of a macho thing, and this actually leads me to want to talk to you about that there are anti-heroes and there are heroes and anti-heroes.
Yeah.
There are mentors and anti-mentors as well. And sometimes anti-mentors teach us maybe as much as mentors do. And one of my anti-mentors is Rambo, right? The Sylvester Stallone character from the movies that were mostly popular in the 80s. Because I think Rambo's onto something, but he's mostly wrong, right? I think he's 1/3 right and 2/3 wrong. And this came from another friend of mine recently who said to me that we have misdefined what courage is in our culture. We've misdefined what a hero is. Our archetypal hero stories in our culture today are usually either big, strong guy, either with powerful weapons or supernatural powers, destroys everything in his way in order to protect some vulnerable people. Sometimes there aren't even the vulnerable people to protect. Sometimes it's just big, strong guy destroys everything in his way in order to get a prize for himself, right?
I think that's most of the time.
Yeah. And we never ask questions about all the people who got destroyed in the way to protect these other people. Okay. The joke that's often made about the original Star Wars trilogy is what about all the non-union workers on the Death Star who got blown up in order to kill the Emperor, right? Or to kill Darth Vader. My friend was saying that true heroism is the act of creating safety for people more vulnerable than me. A deeper form of heroism would be the act of creating safety for people more vulnerable than me without harming anybody else. And the deepest form of heroism would be the act of creating safety for people more vulnerable than me without harming anybody else, and also maintaining a commitment, a radical commitment to fiercely loving myself. The reason for this should be obvious, but it's not. How many times have you seen a vulnerable person who's down on themselves or has low self-esteem or is being highly self-critical, and your heart goes out to them and you say, "You're beautiful, you're wonderful, you shouldn't feel these things about yourself, you should love yourself," right? We've all said that to other people. Who do we find the most difficult to love? It's usually ourselves that we find most difficult to love. Well, why would any of these vulnerable people who we're trying to help, why would they believe us that they should love themselves if they can see by looking at our lives that we don't love ourselves? So even if you don't feel like doing it, it's actually in the interests of protecting the people you care about for you to make some efforts to love yourself, so at least they can see how to do it. So here's the thing. Here's the thing about Rambo.
I love that. Let us sink in. That's really beautiful, because I really do think practicing the art of self-love is the key to living a life of love and prosperity.
That's right, and it's a gift to everybody else around you.
It's a gift to everybody, because
who are the people you most want to spend time with? Is the people who love themselves the most.
You cannot give away something you don't have. So
that's right.
For me to give you my love, I have to love me first.
Yeah.
It is the opposite of narcissism.
That's right. That's absolutely right. This is different to narcissism, because like the most heavily narcissistic people are the ones who are most difficult to be around. Now, the degree to which any of us opens up and takes one step towards self-love, that's enough to open the door. For me to go, great, we'll work with that part. We'll work with that part. You don't have to fix this overnight.
Right.
So the reason why Rambo is an anti-mentor, by which I mean he teaches me how not to do it, is that Rambo actually does care about vulnerable people. You watch the movies, especially the sequels. The first Rambo movie is actually kind of an interesting movie about a veteran of the war in Vietnam who's living with PTSD. It's actually quite a reasonably sensitive movie for its genre, but all the sequels are about Rambo scorching the earth all around him and killing everybody who gets in his way in order to protect vulnerable people. So he's a third of the way to being right, which is he cares about vulnerable people. The problem is he doesn't make any effort to minimize harm to the people who get between him and the vulnerable people. And he certainly doesn't love himself. So the thing I want to say, and if this is the only thing I convey today, I think there are a lot of people out there, all genders, all ages, all the cultures, at least that I'm connected to. I can't speak for every culture, of course, who think that they are weak and ineffective, and who compare themselves negatively to somebody like a Rambo archetype because they don't have the big physical strength or the power of this heavy artillery. However, they do care deeply about the needs of vulnerable people, and they would be prepared to make sacrifices to protect those people, to help create safety for those people. And they're certainly often committed to radically auditing themselves for the harm that they might be doing to people too. So I want to say to those people, because I think I'm like that, I'm more like that person than I am like Rambo.
Yeah, sure.
If you care about the needs of vulnerable people and you're trying to take steps to minimize harm, and you're more willing to die than to kill, you're actually 2/3 of the way to being a more enlightened Rambo than Rambo is himself. Rambo's only a third of the way there because he wants to care for vulnerable people. He just hasn't taken any steps to minimize harm, and he doesn't love himself. And I feel like some of the more tender warrior, self-sacrificing folk need to be in conversation with the more Rambo types, many of whom really, really do care about vulnerable people. They really are fearful for their families and for people they care about. We need to be in dialogue with each other about changing the tactics, reducing harm, and loving ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So let's play with this a little bit. This is a very interesting question. Aren't we missing the Gail male heroes? If not, who are? I always think we start with ourselves when we're trying to solve a conflict. For me, where was I missing the gay male hero in me? Why wasn't I able to love Martin?
Mm-hmm.
And when I discovered that I am my hero, then I can be a hero for others. So I would say we're not seeing him because we're not seeing the hero in ourselves. Mm. And if you really want to find the hero that's missing in your life, find the hero in yourself. Mm-hmm. That's the first beginning. Because once you see the hero we see the hero. I can see the hero in Gareth. I see two heroes right now, two gay male heroes sitting right in front of you, because I know the hero in me and he knows the hero in him. And I'm not criticizing you. I'm just trying to say we all have a narrative inside ourselves that we're not the hero. That's a false narrative. We are the hero. And when you find that hero in you, it's called the hero's journey. You have that hero in you. And when you discover that, you'll see it all around you. That's my take on that. What would you have to say about that?
Yeah, totally echo that. And I would also want to add, any person who identifies as any part of the LGBTQ plus community and who lives in a society that is anything other than 100% affirming of the LGBTQ plus community, which is pretty much every society in the world. There's hardly any society in the world that is 100% fully affirming and inclusive. There's societies that are moving in that direction. Anybody who's in our community who lives with even 1% more authenticity than they did yesterday, 1% that is heroic, because that's a form of caring for the vulnerable person in you. That's a form of making space for tomorrow, for people to make it easier for people who are coming up tomorrow. I think about the people the first open gay rights activists in Northern Ireland in the 60s and 70s, the courage that took. And I don't know that they thought that they were being courageous. I don't know that they thought that they were being heroic. I certainly think they were, and they made my life easier. And hopefully my generation does things that makes the next generation's life easier. And I think another thing just about heroism in general, every now and again, somebody arises on the public stage who we can look at and go, yeah, I see it. I see courage. I see self-sacrificing commitment to the common good. But I think for the most part, these are people who are not known publicly. They're in small communities right around the country and around the world. They're not necessarily issuing press releases. They may not be widely known, but they have made a difference in their community because they've captured a vision for a safer and more compassionate world, and have chosen that no matter what anybody else does, and no matter what politics or religion says, I am going to lead with love, no matter what the consequences are.
Yeah, I think that I want to. That is beautifully articulated. Yeah, there is Harvey movie back in the public world, and I agree. He was a visionary way before his time, and I don't think that he thought of himself as a visionary. I think he just was angry that the way gay people were being treated. So he was acting up like we did like we all did when AIDS came around. We acted up because I didn't think of myself as an activist, but I was angry that the government was just ignoring the fact that my friends were dying of AIDS and they didn't care about it. Well, I got out in the streets and acted up about it, you know, and that's we didn't think at the time of ourselves as being heroes or activists, but every single person that got out and marched and fought for and did the AIDS and the lesbians and everybody else who came in behind us, they're all heroes. All of them are heroes. It's hard to know, but all of us are heroes. You're a hero. Facebook user who just you are a hero. There's a hero in you. And the more you can love, when you say, the more you love ourselves, the easier it is to get to know that hero and be able to be a hero for others. And it's right. It's not in the big splashy people in the world. It's in our communities. And I see right now it's 30 minutes after. So now we're going to go in and we're going to do some meditation and some contemplative prayer. It's called centering prayer. And I know I'm going to lose people because they all want to be entertained by our conversation. But I'm going to encourage you, if you've never done any meditation, if you've never gone inside yourself to find your hero, that's what we're going to do. We're going to go inside right now and we're going to tap into that heroic part of ourselves, that part of us that only knows love. We all have it. It's that creative love, light energy that we have within us. And I'm going to teach you right now something called centering prayer. And it's a very specific type of prayer and meditation process to find that hero within yourself, to tap in and plug into that authentic you. That all it knows is love. Okay, and it's a very simple process. We're going to get still. We're going to quiet ourselves and actually calm down and quiet the mind. We're going to do something called surrender. We're going to intentionally surrender all the narrative in our head, all the stories, all the beliefs, all the judgments we have about ourselves, this world, about Gareth, about me, everything. We're going to let that go. And we're going to get still enough to just quiet the mind and just listen for that still, small voice, which we're going to call the hero today. We're going to call that still, small voice within us, that hero that only knows love. So one of the ways we like to reverse engineer is whenever we want to get still means to quiet and slow down the thinking in our mind. So let me set my timer here real quick. Hold on one second. I forgot to do that. The 20-minute meditation. So what we're going to do is we're going to, when we meditate, the idea is you cannot stop thinking. So don't even try, because you cannot stop thinking, but you can slow it down. And whenever we think, our tongues vibrate slightly. So we're going to reverse engineer it. We're going to massage the back of the tongue to slow down the thinking. And the way I do it is this. Take the tip of your tongue and rest it gently on the roof of your mouth just behind your two front teeth. Part your lips slightly so you can easily breathe through your mouth and your tongue. And gently massage in the back of your mind with your breath the back of your tongue. Ready? Let's try it. And just breathe naturally with the consciousness on going inside and massaging the tongue with the breath. And just notice, and when you focus the mind on the massaging of the tongue, notice what happens. And allow yourself to now just get still by the natural breathing, natural massaging of the back of your tongue. As you feel the breath coming in through the nose, you can actually engage the belly muscles to pull the breath more firmly inside of yourself. Pull the breath in through the nose, down the throat, massage the tongue. Envisioning opening up and expanding the space around your heart. And with your belly muscles, pull the breath more deeply inside as an anchor, to anchor the spirit within your body. And just become more conscious of your breathing, something we do all day long. Breath of life. And to get us more fully into our insides, into our interior, to create more space, we're going to do 3 belly breaths. And they look like this. With the belly muscles, you're going to pull the breath in through the nostrils. You're going to pull it down the throat, massage your tongue, open the heart space, and pull that breath deep into your belly, expanding it and holding it. And then we're going to let it go. You ready? Let's take the first breath. Breathe it in. Use your belly muscles to pull it down, massage the tongue, expand the heart. Hold it just a second, and just gently let it go. And as you release the breath, release every thought, every opinion, every judgment, every story in your head. Hold on to nothing. Let everything go to create space for pure love consciousness, our essence. We're going to do another deep belly breath. So pull the breath in through the nose with the belly muscles, down your throat, massage your tongue, expand the space around your heart, and pull that breath deep into your belly and just hold it for a second and anchor yourself into your chair, into your body. And now gently let it go. And again, any remaining beliefs, opinions, or judgments, or stories, or worries, let them all go. Actively surrender them. Hold on to nothing, especially those feelings of which you are ashamed. Let them all go and feel your way into the space of that hero within you, that essence within you that only knows love. And now, one final belly breath, and then I'm going to be still for the rest of the meditation. You will hear some bells to wake us up and to reset throughout the meditation. The idea there is when we're meditating, we'll find a thought and we'll follow it down a rabbit hole, or we'll go into thinking or planning, worrying, sleeping. And the bell is just to wake us up so we can reset, fall back into love. So here, one more last belly breath, and then we're going to get still and just be still and breathe and just be. Just be with yourself, loving yourself. Ready? With your belly muscles, pull the breath in through the nose. Relax, massage the back of your tongue. Open up your heart. Use the belly muscles to pull the breath and anchor it in your belly. Hold it just for a second and then let anything else that's still there go. And allow yourself to fall back into love. And there's that faint little wake-up bell to wake us up from our thinking, our plotting, our worrying, our planning, and just let it go. Thank that brilliant mind for doing its job, and just smile, let it go, and fall back into that stillness of unconditional love and truth. There's that wake up bell, that sweet wake up bell, to wake us up from our thinking, our plotting, our planning, our worrying, our stories. And just smile with gratitude for that brilliant mind for doing its job and let it go. Give it permission to just give it some time and fall back into love. And there's one more of those sweet little wake-up bells to wake us from our thinking, our sleeping, our story, our worry. And with gratitude for that brilliant brain of yours, just let it go and fall back into love. And there's our final wake-up bell to bring us back into the space, bring us back to the material world, as we say, land of the human. I love Eckhart Tolle's description of human beings. Many humans, one being. So, how are you feeling, Mr. Gareth?
Here is how I feel.
Great. That's a good thing to be. That's the idea. Do you have a regular meditation practice?
Mm-hmm. I do. I do, but this is not the moment to say anything about it. Beyond, so
I'm glad to know you have one. That's the most important thing. You know?
Anything that helps us slow down, you know, and what you've just led there is very powerful. So I'm still in that zone at the moment.
Good place to be, because then when we slow down this praying, it opens up the heart to speak more broadly.
Yeah, this is true.
And that's the joy of meditation. That's the power of meditation. It's a very powerful practice, and it's more than just getting into a place of peace and it's really quieting the mind in the conflict, the inner conflicts we have with ourselves. The heart is never in conflict with the ego, but the ego is always trying to get one up on the heart. It's always trying to do that. So anybody in the audience have a comment they want to make? If anybody stick around, it looks like most people run off and left. They always do. That's okay. Some people like the meditation, some people don't. That's all right. But this is a meditation, so that's why we do it. And some people like learning it, and also they're learning it in the replays. So if you're watching the replay, thank you for joining us today. And if you have any comments, please put them in the comment section, and I will respond to them later when they come up, because I want your experience to be in this noonday power hour as good for you as it is for those who are able to be here live. But one of the best things about Facebook is that you can watch the replay. I watch them all the time, and I probably watch more replays than I watch live recordings. So it's a lot of power in that. So Gareth, we got a few minutes here. How can people get in touch with you if they want to get to know you? They want to know about your book.
Mm-hmm. Two good ways are hownottobeafraid.com, hownottobeafraid.com. That's the name of the book. And GarethHiggins.net. It's my personal website. But I want to say something about the title of the book, if I may. And
absolutely, yes, absolutely, love it.
How Not to Be Afraid is not a book about how to stop feeling fear, because fear is inevitable and necessary. It helps us. It helps us see something that's important, and sometimes it saves our lives. You know, especially if it tells us don't walk too close to the edge of that cliff. That's where it saves our lives. But maybe most of our fear, certainly a lot of our fear, is unnecessary and unhelpful. And it's up to us to learn practices to transform these fears into doorways or portals that will bring us into more life. The practice you've just led us in is one of those practices, you know, breathing slowly. And there are other, containers you could put on that, as you've done with contemplative prayer. But breathing slowly, and individual practices that help slow us down, and then practices of community that help us connect with other people who have our best interests at heart and whose best interests we can champion. Learning this flow, this give and take of service and being met, serving and being met, serving and being met. But the book is called How Not to Be Afraid, in the same way that the TV show What Not to Wear is called What Not to Wear. That show is not telling people not to wear anything. And How Not to Be Afraid is not saying, don't ever be afraid. It's okay to be afraid. It's natural to be afraid. But in the places where fear is dominating us and where it's not necessary and not helpful, there might be some ways that we can transform it. Not just erase it, actually, but go beyond it into living bigger than it. And even the most frightened among us, I think they're the prime candidates, actually, for transforming fear into more life, because they're more in touch with fear than people who are numbing out or doing the Rambo thing and pretending they're not scared.
Yeah, and they're the most frightened. I gotta say, you just teed me up for the most wonderful introduction to two things. You talked about community. Well, I'm a spiritual teacher and a prosperity and mindset coach for gay, bi, and transgender men. And I have a special Facebook group for us. It's called Financial Heart Space for Gay, Transgender, and Bisexual Men. And if you're one of those, then join us in that group, because this Wednesday, every Wednesday, I do a live workshop. And this Wednesday, I have an illustration and an acronym. It's called FAITH. And it is a 5-step process that you can use anytime. It's a beautiful illustration. You can put it on your wall, and to remind you, whenever you're feeling fear and you're stuck in fear and you want to transform it to the creative power of love, it will take you through a 5-step process to do exactly what Gareth has been talking and I've been talking about. So if you're a part of that community, please join us there and join us for that live workshop where I'm going to give you the illustration and tell you how to use it on Wednesday at 1 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. Now, if you're not part of that community, I have something else for you, because I do believe in community of love and support. I have another community called the Financial Mystic Sanctuary. And in that community, everybody is welcome. And in that community, I'm going to be doing a workshop, a workbook in about 2 weeks, a free workbook there on how to use contemplative prayer as a way to solve any problem. And I have a new workbook called the Contemplative Prayer Problem Solving Workbook. And I'm going to give you a copy of the workbook, and I'm going to teach you how to use it. That's going to be a live Zoom workshop in about 2 weeks on a Saturday. So there's 2 places you can join for community and support. One is the Financial Heart Space for gay, transgender, and bisexual men. The other one is for everyone. It's called the Financial Mystic Sanctuary. Now, the whole point of those communities is it's a safe place for us to love and support each other through facing our fears, because we all have it and we can't do it alone. And something you said earlier, Gareth, we have to be willing to ask for help, but we have to know we're in a safe place where we can be bold enough to ask for help. And that's the point of both of those 2 Facebook groups for those communities. So if that's you, please join me. I'd love to have you part of that group. Otherwise, may love and prosperity prevail. Thank you for joining us today.